She mocked a supermarket employee with Down syndrome. What the store owner did next changed everything. The supermarket doors slide open, and a rush of cool air greets the steady stream of customers pushing carts through the entrance. It's mid-afternoon, right in that sweet spot between the lunch crowd and the evening rush. Shoppers weave through aisles, some focused, others meandering, browsing labels, checking prices. Near the produce section, an older woman picks through a display of bell peppers, her fingers pressing lightly against the skin to test for firmness. A young mother juggles a restless toddler on her hip while scanning a shopping list scribbled on the back of an envelope. It's an ordinary day, almost too ordinary. And then there's Kevin. Dressed in his neatly pressed store uniform, a name tag pinned to his chest, Kevin moves with quiet focus, carefully arranging loaves of bread on a rolling cart near the bakery section. He takes his job seriously. Every loaf placed just right, edges lined up, labels facing forward. He hums softly as he works, lost in the simple rhythm of stocking shelves, a sense of pride in every small task. Kevin has worked at this store for nearly 2 years. At 28, he's one of the most reliable employees, always on time, always eager to help. The regulars know him well. Some stop to chat, others give him a friendly nod in passing. A few minutes later, a woman approaches the counter near Kevin's station. She's not a regular. She looks to be in her late 40s, with sharp, impatient movements and an air of someone who doesn't like waiting. She sighs audibly as she sets her basket down on the checkout belt, already drumming her fingers on the edge of the register before anyone has even acknowledged her. Kevin, standing just a few feet away, notices her and smiles, stepping toward the counter with his usual enthusiasm. "Hi there. Did you find everything okay?" His voice carries warmth, the kind that makes people feel at ease. The woman barely glances at him. "Yeah, just ring it up." Her tone is clipped, her eyes fixed on her phone as she scrolls through something, disinterested. Kevin doesn't seem to mind the lack of response. He's used to all kinds of customers, some chatty, some quiet, some in a hurry. He begins scanning the items carefully, placing each one in a paper bag: milk, eggs, a bag of apples. He pauses for just a second, turning the carton of eggs slightly to check the top, making sure none are cracked. A small gesture, a simple habit. The woman suddenly snaps. "Oh my God, can you hurry it up? It's not that complicated." Her voice is loud enough to turn a few heads from the nearby aisles. Kevin blinks, startled by the sudden outburst. But he doesn't stop. He just keeps bagging, moving a little faster now, trying to do his best. But the woman isn't finished. She crosses her arms, her face twisting in frustration. "Jesus, this is taking forever," she mutters under her breath. Then louder. "Figures." The word hangs in the air, cold and deliberate. A man at the next register pauses mid-scan, glancing over. A teenage girl near the gum display lowers her phone. People notice. But Kevin? He just keeps going, because he's used to this. Still, something about the way she said it. It's different this time. And the worst part? She's just getting started. But she doesn't know who's watching. Kevin keeps his head down, hands steady as he continues bagging groceries. He's heard remarks like that before, maybe not always as direct, but the meaning is the same. He doesn't react. He just keeps working. But the woman, her name is Angela, though no one in the store knows that yet, isn't done. She huffs, shifting her weight from one foot to the other, clearly irritated. "Come on, I don't have all day," she snaps again, rolling her eyes as Kevin carefully tucks a loaf of bread into the bag. "Sorry," he says quietly, his voice even, controlled. He means it too, because Kevin is the kind of person who apologizes even when he doesn't have to. But Angela doesn't hear the sincerity, or maybe she doesn't care. She exhales sharply, throwing up her hands. "Oh, for God's sake, just move." She steps forward suddenly, reaching toward the bag to do it herself, but in her frustration, she knocks over the carton of eggs. Crack! A sticky mess spreads across the conveyor belt. Kevin immediately reaches for a paper towel, but before he can, Angela rounds on him. "This is exactly what I'm talking about." Her voice rises, sharp enough that a man browsing near the candy aisle pauses mid-reach. "Why would they even let someone like you work here? This isn't a daycare." Kevin stops. The paper towel in his hand stills. The air changes. Nearby, a cashier named Jordan, a college student working the summer shift, freezes mid-scan, eyes darting between Kevin and the woman. A few feet away, a mother gently pulls her child closer, watching but saying nothing. But Angela, she doesn't see any of it. She doesn't notice the shift. Instead, she leans in, her voice dropping just enough to be cruel. "I don't have time for this," she mutters. "You shouldn't be working here if you can't even handle something this simple." Kevin swallows hard, the words landing heavier than they should. He doesn't cry, not here, not now. But his fingers tighten slightly around the edge of the counter. Still, he doesn't speak. He just does what he always does. He keeps going. He wipes up the mess, clears the broken eggshells, and moves to scan the rest of her items, his hands just a little less steady than before. But the rest of the store, they're watching now. A woman in her 60s, standing 2 registers away, whispers something under her breath. Jordan shifts uncomfortably, clearly wanting to say something, but before he can, Angela lets out another loud sigh. "Oh, forget it," she says, grabbing her purse. "I'll just go to another line. This is ridiculous." And just like that, she reaches for her cart, ready to walk away. But someone else isn't ready to let it go. From the far end of the counter, a voice cuts through the tension like a knife. That's enough. It's calm but firm. A voice that commands attention. Angela stops. Slowly, she turns. And that's when she sees him. Mr. Daniels, the store owner. He's been standing a few feet away the entire time, watching, listening, and now he's stepping forward. But Angela has no idea what's coming next. Angela's fingers tighten around the handle of her cart. Her face hardens, her stance shifting slightly as if bracing for a confrontation. She doesn't know who Mr. Daniels is yet, just that he's some middle-aged man in a button-down, standing with his arms crossed, looking directly at her. But she doesn't like his tone. "Excuse me," she says, lifting her chin slightly. Mr. Daniels doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't need to. His presence alone shifts the energy in the store. "I said that's enough," he repeats, his eyes steady, unblinking. "I've been standing here for the last 5 minutes, and I've heard every word you've said." Angela snorts, shaking her head. "Oh, give me a break," she mutters, shoving her cart forward as if to leave. "I'm just trying to check out. He was taking forever and Mr. Daniels steps directly into her path. She stops. The store is quiet now. Jordan, the cashier, doesn't move. The older woman from 2 registers down slowly sets her basket on the floor. A man near the self-checkout leans against his cart, arms crossed, watching. No one is pretending not to notice anymore. Mr. Daniels tilts his head slightly. "You know, I've been running this store for 23 years, he says, his voice level. "I've seen just about every kind of customer come through those doors. The impatient ones, the rude ones. But you," he lets the words settle before continuing. "I don't get people like you too often." Angela bristles. "Like me?" she echoes, her voice sharper now. Mr. Daniels gives a slow nod. "The kind who think they can say whatever they want to people they believe are beneath them." Angela laughs dryly, but it's forced. "Oh, please, you're being dramatic. All I did was—" "You insulted my employee," Mr. Daniels cuts in, his voice still calm but laced with something colder. "You mocked him, spoke to him like he was less than you, and now that you're being called out, you want to act like it's not a big deal." Angela's lips press into a thin line. She doesn't respond immediately, maybe because she knows she's not winning this argument. Kevin is still behind the register, staring down at his hands, shoulders stiff. He's not used to someone stepping in like this. Mr. Daniels turns slightly, glancing at Kevin before looking back at Angela. "You see that young man right there?" He gestures toward Kevin. "He's been working here for 2 years. He's one of the best employees I have. Shows up on time, never complains, does his job with more care than most people I've hired." Angela crosses her arms. "That's great," she says flatly. Mr. Daniels' jaw tenses, just for a second. "You don't get it, do you?" He exhales through his nose, shaking his head slightly. "People like Kevin have to work twice as hard just to be treated with half the respect. And the moment he makes one small mistake, people like you, people who don't even know him, think it's okay to tear him down, because it makes you feel bigger." Angela's nostrils flare slightly. The way the store is dead silent now doesn't help. She can feel the weight of all the eyes on her. She shifts uncomfortably. "Look," I didn't mean—" "I don't care what you meant," Mr. Daniels interrupts. His voice is low, steady, measured. "What matters is what you did. And in my store, we don't treat people like that." Angela's fingers twitch on the handle of her cart. Her face is flushed now, her irritation clear. But she's stuck, trapped between her own pride and the growing realization that she's already lost this battle. She glances around, her gaze darting over the sea of strangers staring at her, waiting. She has two options: apologize or double down. But which one will she choose? Angela's lips press into a thin, tight line. Her gaze flickers from Mr. Daniels to Kevin, then to the customers around her, watching, waiting. The weight of their stares burns into her skin. She hates being put on the spot like this, hates losing control. "I don't see why everyone's acting like I committed some kind of crime," she mutters, voice lower now, but the defensiveness is still there. "I was just trying to check out." Mr. Daniels tilts his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "Is that what you were doing?" he asks, his voice measured. "Because from where I was standing, it looked like you were tearing down a good man for absolutely no reason." Angela lets out a breath through her nose, her grip tightening around the shopping cart handle. Kevin still hasn't spoken. He's standing stiffly, his fingers fidgeting slightly against the register. The familiar feeling of being the center of unwanted attention claws at him. But this time it's different. Because this time, someone's standing up for him. Angela shifts uncomfortably. She looks over at Kevin, her expression unreadable for a moment, then scoffs. "All right," she says, shrugging one shoulder. "Fine. I'm sorry. Are we done now?" The apology is hollow, dripping with insincerity. Kevin glances up for the first time, searching Mr. Daniels' face. Is that enough? Mr. Daniels exhales quietly, but there's no relief in his posture. If anything, his expression hardens. "See, here's the thing," he says, crossing his arms. "I've been running this place a long time, long enough to know when someone actually means what they say, and when they're just trying to get out of trouble." Angela's eyes narrow. "Are you serious?" Mr. Daniels doesn't move. "Dead serious." Angela lets out a sharp laugh, shaking her head. "This is insane," she mutters under her breath, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. "I don't need to stand here and be lectured like a child." "No, you don't," Mr. Daniels agrees, his voice calm. "But I also don't need to serve customers who think it's okay to treat my employees like garbage." Angela freezes. Her eyes widen just a fraction. "What?" Mr. Daniels steps forward slightly, keeping his voice steady. "You're done shopping here," he tells her simply. "Go ahead and leave." Angela stares. For the first time, she looks genuinely caught off guard. "You're kicking me out?" she asks, almost in disbelief. Mr. Daniels doesn't flinch. "That's exactly what I'm doing." A ripple of quiet murmurs moves through the store. A woman near the self-checkout nods slightly, approvingly. Jordan, the young cashier, finally exhales, as if he's been holding his breath this whole time. Angela, though, is furious. Her face flushes red, her fingers gripping the cart so tightly her knuckles turn white. "You can't do that," she snaps. "You can't just throw out paying customers." Mr. Daniels raises an eyebrow. "You're right," he says. "I can't throw out paying customers." A beat. Then smoothly he adds, "But I can throw out bullies." The silence in the store is deafening. Angela gapes at him. For the first time in a long time, she doesn't have a response. She looks around, searching for some kind of support, some validation that she's the one being wronged here. But all she sees are stony expressions, crossed arms, people waiting for her to leave. There's nowhere to go. She lets out a bitter, breathy laugh. "Unbelievable," she mutters. "This is ridiculous." But there's no fight left in her voice. She grabs her purse off the cart, whirls around on her heel, and storms toward the exit. No one stops her. But as she reaches the door, Mr. Daniels calls out one last thing. "I hope, someday, you figure out why this happened," he says. "For your sake." Angela pauses just for a fraction of a second, but then she's gone. The doors slide shut behind her, and the store exhales. For a moment, no one moves. The store is still, as if waiting for something. The tension that had thickened the air just moments ago doesn't immediately disappear. It lingers, pressing down like an invisible weight. Then, slowly, the conversations start again. A man near the dairy aisle shakes his head, muttering something under his breath before turning back to his cart. A woman at register 3 gives Kevin a small, warm smile before swiping her card. The normal rhythm of the store begins to return, but something feels different. Kevin hasn't moved. He's still behind the register, fingers lightly resting on the counter, his gaze lowered slightly. Mr. Daniels turns toward him. "Kevin," he says, voice softer now, gentler. Kevin looks up. His face doesn't show much, but his eyes say everything. He's processing, not just what happened, but the fact that someone actually stood up for him. Kevin has worked here for 2 years, and in those 2 years, he's dealt with a lot of small moments like this. The sideways looks, the muttered remarks, the impatient sighs when he took an extra few seconds to bag something carefully. But this was the first time someone had said something, and not just said something, done something. He clears his throat. I can finish bagging," he says, voice quiet, almost hesitant. Mr. Daniels gives him a long look. Then he nods. "All right." Kevin gets back to work. Jordan, the cashier next to him, watches for a second before glancing at Mr. Daniels. "That was—" He pauses, searching for the right word. "That was cool," he finally says. Mr. Daniels chuckles quietly. "No," he corrects. "That was necessary." A few registers over, an older woman steps forward. She places a single carton of orange juice on the belt and looks directly at Kevin. "You did a good job today," she says simply. Kevin blinks. It's such a simple thing, such a small sentence, but it lands heavier than anything else. Kevin nods. "Thank you." And this time, he means it. Across the store, people go about their shopping. The world doesn't stop turning, but something shifted today. And Kevin isn't the only one who felt it. But what about Angela? She's already out the door, already crossing the parking lot, but the words still echo in her head. "I hope, someday, you figure out why this happened." She reaches her car, yanks open the door, slides into the driver's seat, but she doesn't start the engine. Because for the first time in a long time, Angela isn't sure if she was right. But is that enough to change her? Angela grips the steering wheel tightly, her knuckles turning pale. The parking lot is half full, shoppers coming and going, but she doesn't move. She tells herself she's just cooling off, that this whole thing was blown out of proportion, that Mr. Daniels was on some self-righteous power trip, and the people in that store were pathetic for ganging up on her. But deep down, a different thought creeps in. Was I really that out of line? She exhales sharply, staring out the windshield. The words replay in her head. "You don't get it, do you? People like Kevin have to work twice as hard just to be treated with half the respect. You think it's okay to tear him down because it makes you feel bigger." She wants to shake it off, to push past it, but something about it sticks. Because maybe, just maybe, they weren't wrong. She doesn't turn the key right away. Instead, she just sits there, thinking. Kevin is still working. The shift is almost over, but he's not in a hurry. He bags groceries carefully the way he always does. Takes his time making sure nothing gets crushed. Some customers smile at him. A few even say thank you. But what surprises him most? A small line has started at his register. Not because it's the shortest, not because people are in a rush. They're choosing his line on purpose. Mr. Daniels watches from a distance, a quiet satisfaction settling in his chest. People noticed today. Kevin's co-workers saw it. The customers saw it. And Kevin? He felt it. For once, he wasn't just expected to brush it off, to let it roll off his back like it didn't matter. Today, someone stood up for him. And in the end, that mattered more than anything. Angela finally starts the engine, but before she backs out, her eyes drift to the store entrance. Through the glass doors, she sees Kevin at the register, still working, still being himself. And then, just for a split second, he laughs. It's small, just a moment, but something about it hits her in the chest. She doesn't know why, but as she pulls out of the parking lot, something tells her she won't forget this. Not today, not ever. Respect is free. Standing up for what's right, that costs nothing. But doing nothing, that can cost someone everything. If this story made you think, even just for a second, then it was worth telling. And if you believe in treating people with kindness, with fairness, with the dignity they deserve, then share this video. Because sometimes, all it takes to change someone's perspective is witnessing a moment like this.